So we're back, and just recapitulating the last few parts. The first one, we started dealing with how is it that whenever we try to engage with psychoanalysis, it becomes obscure because of various myths and narratives that are the only means by which we can get to psychoanalysis. What that means for today's society is that we have to deal with jokes about fucking your mom or Sigmund Freud doing coke in order to talk about psychoanalysis. Now, taking that as a prop, we started looking at why looking at narratives matters. One of the most central things to psychoanalysis is self-narration. So we look back at the image of the couch as some mythological figure of psychoanalysis, only to use that as a way to get back into the psychoanalytic practice. Immediately we realize that when we are laying down on the couch is for the function of self-narration, where there's an analysand who is telling the analyst their troubles and the analyst is listening. So now we are going to be asking the question, what is the psychoanalyst listening for then? In a session of analysis, we would have the analysand self-narrating to the analyst. They would try to represent themselves to the analyst, but there is the occasion in which the analysand may be found out, or as we have worded before, spoken out, saying more than they intended to. The analyst listens carefully, and as they find these moments of tensions and torsions in the text of the self-narrative, the analyst will ask questions that will ignite further speaking over what was unintentionally given away. In other words, where the analyst speaks is to tease out that thing that got spoken out. Very often we will find ourselves talking around an unspeakable thing, which even in the absence of or deliberate omission, it will haunt the process of I speak myself out to the point of I'm spoken out. The analyst is listening for those knots and tensions in the process of self-narrative that stand for some unspeakable thing. Thus, the analyst is listening carefully for something that disrupts the sense of unity of self-narrative, the interruption of a complete sense of recollecting one's self to look at the gaps and contradictions that haunt it. It is to this end that analysis seeks to bring the unspeakable thing to speak itself out to the analysand. But it is not just a matter of bringing the unspeakable thing to the front of the session, rather it is to ease and or to examine the tension or knotting between what constitutes the analysand's self-image and the unspeakable thing it seeks to avoid and reject at any point. This is something that Lacan formalized into the image that is the background of this entire video, though due to the quality of my video program, which is literally just a Windows 10 one, it probably looks like shit, but it's there. You can search it up. This is Lacan's Analytic Discourse, and part of what I'm hoping to do here is to explain it a little bit, but as with any mathem that Lacan puts as a formulation, it takes a little bit more than just one session to get it, as it does with psychoanalysis, right? So the formula here can be supplemented by two important phrases, one of Freud's with Lacan's translation, and the other one Lacan's. The first one, pardon my German, wo es war, soll ich werden. Where it was, there shall I become. So Lacan goes on to say, I think where I am not, therefore I am where I do not think. I am not whenever I am the plaything of my thought. I think of what I am, where I do not think to think. In the first quote, we have the it, often translated as id. Lacan translated it to the French ça. This pertains the letter A, the A, that is in the formula that we're talking about, and this is what has been excluded or left over as the mutilated aspect of the split subject in other discourses, as we may see in the case of hysteria, for example, where one is caught in this tension between how one speaking oneself out and how is it that one is positioned in the very act of speaking, that one is caught by a double of oneself and struggling reconciling which one is more authentic. Of course, there's going to be problems with this definition of hysteria, but we can talk about that in a specific another time. Right now, where we're concerned with the discourse of analysis, we understand that this is a discourse where one finds oneself allowed to speak it. As in hysteria, it remains suppressed. A lack of attention further obscures it into unhearable murmurs drowned in the noise of knowledge and mastery. When we seem to have a grasp of the world, for example, in technology, we find that at times we lose something of ourselves. That's at least a Heideggerian interpretation of this sort of hysteria of modernity, that we have lost something in the current modes of knowledge and mastery that society is implementing. The analytic ear is one that is trained for an attention towards it, besides any theoretical knowledge that the analyst may have concerning it. The analyst has to set aside their knowledge and submit to it as their teacher. As the analyst merely performs the space of the subject who is supposed to know, and as an empty structural place for the analysand to withdraw from themselves and deposit it there so that it may speak. The analyst is in a sense a shared body as they perform the mediating role of truth, one akin to the force of symbols such as crucifixes or sanctuaries, as a space that has to be transverse in order for one's own truth event to be delivered. The shared body as a symbol or as a part of the structure of fiction is also the condition for the possibility of truth in this psychoanalytic sense. The site of speech is in this other, this empty structural place we talked about, this subject who is supposed to know, where a speech takes on value as it inaugurates the dimension of truth. It is in this regard that in order to conceive of the practice of psychoanalysis towards truth, we need to understand that truth is structured like a fiction, or in its most popular phrasing in Lacan, the unconscious, it, is structured like a language. This is not to say that it is a language or that it gains complete integration into a fiction, self-narrative, or myth. Though there may be cases of terminable analysis where the imaginary integration or symbolic sublimation are possible, we nevertheless have to insist on the quintessential issue of didactic interminable analysis as it relates to the real. The structure of metaphor is irrelevant as it may reflect the varying of the subject into its mutilated representation by this signifier, the symbol, in relationship to incorporation. But also it is relevant in that one can feel with the signifier that which metaphor expressions hovers over in this excorporation. The metaphor is not merely primal god of castration that imposes this signifier of the phallus as both the omnipotence and impotence of linguistic expression, or the ability to actually be. The metaphor may also be talking around or feeling around. As in analysis, directness may be obscene or improper to the expression of the unconscious. Regardless, it is not the language, and it is not the fiction. Yet language and fiction are the other, or shared body that truth must transverse for it to be felt. In this regard, the register of signification, insofar as fiction and language sustain the veil and facade of totalization, the register of signification is nevertheless teased by torsions and tensions that bring to our attention the register of enjoyment. It is then that the reason why it cannot be fully incorporated into language and fiction is because what remains as a leftover or surplus at the register of enjoyment in relationship to desire. When we enter the space of language, or the sight of the other, we're nevertheless assuming the position of the other, and alongside with it, we also take on its desire. And it is